Ah, Paddington. What a lovely little bear. Though really the Browns, well, they're a little bit irresponsible, don't you think? They're a little bit too bloody quick to take in a known to be dangerous wild animal into their family home. I don't care how bloody polite he is at that station. Give him half a chance and he will have Judy's arm off and, well, he'll be ripping into the flesh on Henry's back like that Grizzly in The Revenant. He's a bear. Don't bring bears into your house. Luckily, he didn't do that, and luckily he remained a charmer during his stay with the Brown family. The Browns housing an immigrant and him turning out to be a nice, contributive part of the household and indeed society, well, you can see why the Daily Mail didn't run with that narrative and kept running with that little middle class Rupert guy who stays isolated in his little rural area with his friends who all have the same accent. You can see why they stuck with that, can't you? You might be as stunned as I was to discover that young Paddington Bear had as many as 5 software titles put out on the ZX Spectrum, courtesy of little-known programmers Collins Software, and they all came out in 1983 and 1984. 5 pieces of software based on Paddington. Now, that's not to say that they were all games. Notice I didn't say games, but we will get to that later. First of all, we need to look at the Peruvian Ursine's long history, albeit in a massively shortened fashion, so we can get to the good stuff, which is games. Way back in 1958, struggling author Thomas Michael Bond penned a children's book called A Bear Called Paddington, a small friendly bear from darkest Peru. He was found at Paddington railway station with a battered case full of marmalade sandwiches, a red hat and a blue coat containing a label that reads, "Please look after this bear. Thank you." There you go, terrible parents. If you want to abandon your kids, but you want to feel assured they'll be brought up by quite a wealthy middle-class family, you know, to numb that nagging guilt in your belly that you've done something terrible, just dump them in a local station with a polite message sewn into that Lonsdale tracksuit top. Job's a good un. I'm sure nothing bad will happen. Not soon after the Browns take the bear into their home, they take him into their hearts, and the success of this initial story led to a near endless slew of stories and collections from Michael Bond that eventually would birth the iconic 1976 series Paddington by Film Fair. Film Fair were the animation team behind the Magic Roundabout, which had a Spectrum game that I covered here, and also the Wombles that also had a video game that I can plug now because I did a video on that, so that's a bit shameless of me, but there they are. There's a link in the top corner to that game. The Paddington series had a very distinct stop motion puppet of Paddington that sort of hangs around in a 2D world that is populated by similarly 2D human characters. I felt really unsettled by this little setup as a child. The very fabric of physics is challenged by this multiple dimensional world, and despite the whole concept of that being as maddening as an Eldritchian horror, you know what, actually it works quite well and it's quite a neat concept. Later animated series that were slightly more traditional in their approach followed in the following decades, as did a pair of movies that looked like they would be absolutely awful from viewing the trailers, but ended up being charming, whimsical efforts that defied all expectations, mainly mine. I was expecting them to be shite, and they weren't shite. Very early on in the Spectrum's life, educational programmers Collinsoft obtained the rights to publish software based on Paddington's license on the Spectrum, the Electron and the Commodore 64, and boy did they publish those games, and boy did they do it quickly. Most of them are decidedly light on content and are mostly not actually games. Yes, the ultimate betrayal of a child's trust. This side, of course, of leaving them on a train platform with a label on them, expecting a family to pick them up and give them a good life, is to sit them down in front of a game, only for that game not to be a game, but some software that's trying to teach them stuff. The horror, then, that is educational software. So let's deal with these in quick order. Paddington's problem picture has you asking the furry-faced critter to fit a shape in the available space in the blue rectangle by pressing a number key that corresponds to the shape. And that's all you do. And he does this. And he does this painstakingly slowly. And that is pretty much it. Wow, yes, and that was £6.10 for that, thank you very much. Objectively, this is the worst value I've ever seen, and it's only just over a £5. Yuck. Worst game I've ever played? Well, possibly. However, you've got to bear in mind that it was meant for the me of its release date in 1983, rather than the me of 2021, so maybe it gets a light pass. Maybe. Not much more advanced is Paddington's Early Visit, which teaches the woods defecating chancer, and indeed those who play along with it, how to read a clock. And once again, you're made to sit there as it draws a clock very, very, very slowly. Sometimes, as an extra treat, it draws 2 clocks, one at a time. Very, very slowly. You'll need the patience of Paddington to get through this one. Paddington and the Disappearing Ink isn't even slightly pretending to be a game. You just get the chance to write a letter with the red-hatted mammal's supervision. By the end of this, you too will be able to compose an abusive correspondence with a cartoon man-tiger like I have here. Paddington's shopping mix-up, and here we get to do sums. Hooray! Choose your type of sum, and after 10 sums, the software gives you a little reward. It lets you play an actual game. It's a barely responsive experience where you must steer Paddington backwards and forwards, catching glacially plummeting apples in a mug. But let's not knock the morsels that we have here on offer. Then you can choose to do more sums or not. If you choose not to do more sums, then you go to the greengrocers where you do more sums, because f*** you, I guess. As poor and low on content these games are, they do come with a Paddington story by Michael Bond in the manual, but still, harumph. Finally, we have Paddington's Garden Game, and it's an actual game. It doesn't even try to teach you anything. With a name like that, I was worried that you were going to get us to differentiate between a potato and a kumquat, Paddington. You had me going, old son. Paddington's Garden Game has the bear on a mission to catch butterflies in a over-the-top view flick screen maze. The butterfly colours denote different amounts of points for each butterfly captured, and all you have to do to catch them is to walk into them. Take that, you fancy coloured moth. Also on offer are the mega points that are garnered for chewing on a marmalade sandwich. You feed that addiction, you little hairy bastard. Sounds pretty simple, doesn't it? Well, it should. It's a game aimed at 5 to 8-year-olds. That said, don't go expecting to finish it completely unhindered. It turns out that hedgehogs and wasps cannot be doing with the naive bear and his bug-capturing escapades, and so they will do what they must to put an end to such tomfoolery. Not only that, but Paddington must be ultra cautious not to trample upon the plants, and if he does, he'll trip and his fun day of imprisoning insects will be done, and his injured frame will be wheeled off for a commisseratory round of marmalade toast. Probably. It's probably better than eating it off the ground in the garden, though, Paddington. This is actually way trickier than it sounds, given that flower beds are quite well known for not actually moving. That said, any sort of contact with any part of Paddington's body will cause him to fall over in immense pain. And that's it really. There's not really more I can add to this review. That's all there is to the game. But you know what? After the educational titles, it's like finding a marmalade sandwich in a pile of slowly generating clocks. The only review of Paddington's Garden Game got it a 4 out of 5 with Sinclair User. They said that it has all the ingredients of arcade action with several screens of action, 3 lives and a task, and the graphics are smooth. I reckon that's a fair score, as for an early effort aimed at kids, Paddington's Garden Game isn't too bad at all. And you know what? That's it for this week. The next episode will see my brain a little more taxed, I reckon, than these rudimentary early lessons from a bear, as episode 62 will be about a far more adult intellectual pursuit: Mastermind. Give it a peruse. Do you see? Do you see what I did there? Peruse, like Paddington's from Peru. Anyway, never mind. Like, subscribe, and K. Thanks, bye.